Today's Dan Le Batard Show is sponsored by ADT Commercial for Business. ADT Commercial serves businesses ranging from mid-sized organizations to large-scale enterprises. Think of them as a special team who has one focus, your business security. They provide a comprehensive line of security, fire, life safety, and risk management solutions, professional-grade systems for commercial-grade businesses. With ADT Commercial, every day is game day. Fortune 1000 companies rely on ADT Commercial for highly complex, scalable, integrated solutions that help solve their unique business challenges. And if you are looking for a partner to upgrade or take over the monitoring and service of your current system, ADT Commercial can help to painlessly install and maintain large-scale and multi-site businesses. No pain, that's good in sports and good in business security. Visit us today at ADT.com/special teams to learn more. The Dan Le Batard with Stugotz Show podcast is presented by Capital One. This is Banking Reimagined.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
Guillermo, put it on the poll, please. Do you already miss crowd noise? And also, put it on the poll, do you want to strangle Florida spring breakers with your bare hands? Now, I am echoing in my headset, and I want the audience to know something as we sink into the stink of doing this radio show on remote. I don't know how many of you guys, Chris and Billy and Mike and Stugotz, I don't know how many of you guys have been watching how entertainment has changed as everybody gets a little more quarantined. But John Oliver doing his show without crowd noise becomes a different show. Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert trying to do their shows from home. I mean, Howard Stern's not even doing his show. Conan O'Brien is trying to figure out a way to do his show. And we are being held together here by rope and bandages and string. Mike Ryan just moments ago just took my credit card and made some sort of payment so that I can see Chris and Billy and Tony, and I don't have any idea what that payment is for. I know that everyone just disappeared a second ago, and the message was taking your meetings from basic to pro on my phone, and so it's just chaos. And what I wanted to ask you, Stugotz, is, and forgive me for being a little self-involved here, we'll get into whatever sports news there is in a little bit, but I've been hugely frustrated the last 3 days because we're doing too common of a radio show. And while you guys have been very kind in the audience saying thank you for giving us some sense of normalcy, I've been hugely frustrated because I can't have our normal conversations with Billy and Chris and Tony and Roy and Mike, and it's just me sort of talking and then waiting for Stugotz to talk. And then what happens, Stugotz? What is that? All right, I
don't know what happened. I didn't do anything, man. Okay. I dialed in like I have every single day, and I mean, you must have thrown it to me, and I wasn't there for you. I didn't do anything.
No, what you did was, first of all, I heard something fall. Stop yelling at you. I haven't started yelling at you yet.
Hey, but you're about to. I know you.
I heard something fall in the background, and finally your vision came up on my computer, and all I saw was your butt crack because you were bent over doing something, saying that nothing fell to the ground, while all that was on the screen was your butt crack as you bent over, and you've been complaining that you hurt your back doing yoga, so you bent over incredibly stiffly. What happened during yoga? Why are you doing yoga?
Well, I mean, listen, I tried meditation, and yesterday I tried yoga. I was not very good at meditating, so I went to yoga yesterday, and because I'm unaware and not really accepting the fact that I am getting a lot older, Dan, I tried to go to like advanced yoga instead of beginner yoga because I figured I could handle it. And it hurt, man. Yoga is hard. My back is really strained from trying to do yoga. I tried to do things with my body that I simply cannot do.
For those of you who do not know, Stugotz's back is hurt for about 7 years, and his solution to every back problem is to get the epidural medicine that women use when they go through labor. Instead of doing ab crunches to strengthen his core like he was doing yesterday during commercial breaks, what he does is he makes sure that something taps into his spinal fluid so that he could get back relief. It's probably not much in the way of a solution. But what I wanted to talk to you and Mike about as we try to get Billy and Tony and Chris and Roy up here is, do you guys remember, and you know how miserable I was when we were doing this show because I sort of value the way the intimacy of radio. Like our show has become sticky in a strange way over the years because we are a bit of a dysfunctional family that exists inside of your head largely. And it's super intimate. It's an old-fashioned medium. It's one of the reasons that I love radio more than all the mediums is because there are so many people out there where we are sort of the friends in your head, the voices in your head. And then ESPN wanted to televise it, and we agreed to televise it. And we moved into these studios that were big and ornate, and the ocean was in the background. And if you're wondering these days why we work in a closet, in a janitor's closet, it's because we never figured it out. Like, we had this big studio, and me and Stugotz are sitting, and it looked like a television show, and Mike was sitting in front of a big screen. What happened, Mike? The Roomba is making too much noise?
I'm wondering how long it is you're going to go without addressing the fact that your Roomba has hit us in the feet 17 times in this first segment.
All right, I just turned it off. Yes. Do you know what? Put it on the poll, Guillermo. Do you know what a Roomba is? I like the idea of a robot working for me when I'm not cleaning the house.
It struck his feet like 6 times, no lie, during that opening segment, and he's just chill. Like, under all these circumstances, everything else makes him uncomfortable, but the Roomba striking his foot is like the most normal
Let me
thing.
explain something to you. What's been happening to me for the last 3 days. At this point, I am so uncomfortable doing a radio show that we have been hugely relaxed and comfortable and confident doing for the better part of 2 damn decades. I could be hit by lightning during a segment and I wouldn't even notice. Like, I would just keep talking. I was just like, how many interceptable passes did Jameis Winston have last year if I was struck by lightning? So anyways, my point is we never figured it out. We just changed studios. The reason we work in a closet is because of the intimacy of being able to see everybody's faces and when somebody wants to talk and when somebody's got the joke. And so this has been a lot of trial and error, and we've been stumbling around. And the technology is a real bafflement to me because not only am I getting old, Stugotz, but yesterday we're taping something for what we're calling highly quarantined, okay? And I'm talking to Mina Kimes and I'm talking to Katie Nolan. And for some reason, as I'm talking or giving my take on whatever it is the subject of the day was, my computer starts talking. But I didn't know it was my computer. I just heard somebody's computer talking. And it's because my elbow was on the wrong button of something because I'm using this computer in a way that I've never used this computer before. But anyways, so to let the audience look behind the curtain a little bit, you remember, Stugotz, you remember how many months did we do that show on Fusion Television before we had to move it because we never did figure out how to do what our radio show normally is. It's not any kind of normal now. I'm hoping we figure this out over time. I think we might figure it out over time, but I'm not very good at change. How many months do you think it was before we just had to nuke the whole thing?
You know what? We were in that big studio where you do HQ. It felt, it felt like it was probably a year. It felt like 5 years. It felt like we were there for 5 years. You really weren't comfortable with it from the standpoint where we could not make eye contact with our producers. We were in separate rooms. We were looking at Billy, Chris, and Roy through a television screen. And I am hoping upon hope here, Dan, that you get more comfortable doing it this way because I feel like we're going to be doing it this way for a while. So
well, and so for those of you who haven't been listening, just so that you know like how this has been put together with bandages, every time that you hear from Billy or Chris or Roy or Tony, it's Mike taking his headset off because I'm asking Mike, I'm telling him, hey, Mike, do we have another headset here? It's Mike taking his headset off and putting the microphone of his headset up to the speakers of my computer so that you can hear however distorted it sounds. And it sounds a lot worse to me and Stugotz because you got Tony and Billy and Bristol and Mike, riding the levels. But what we're hearing, I'm hearing myself in my ears. I'm hearing things that are distracting. I'm hearing you guys come across poorly, tinny, and empty. And so what ends up happening is I get hugely self-conscious. I get vulnerable. I start sweating. I get uncomfortable. And then what do? Let's talk sports. And in about a month, we ain't going to have any of those to talk about. So the problem that we have is that we need to get this figured out in a hurry, right? Because when we're together in that small closet, much of the content content comes from just you being an idiot, pinballing around the room, just talking to everybody, bothering everybody, and now you're just locked in your house, and the only content we get from you is that you hurt your back doing yoga, or you tried to do meditation for 90 seconds. Like, it's not like I need you for the content. It's one of the many reasons our marriage has lasted as long as it has, even though you are profoundly unctuous. Like, you are a fountain of content, and you're not interacting with other human beings, so I don't have any of the funny interactions to work with.
What do we do? You painted such a bleak picture.
No, I hope we figure it out, but I'm just trying to be honest with the audience so that they understand, like, it is not acceptable to me how common our show has sounded over the last 3 days. Like, the standard that we've established, sloppy by design, the idea that bad radio is good radio, it only becomes bad radio if we're not sinking into it and enjoying it. And it's been very hard for me to enjoy under these conditions because my default, which it's never the case, Stugotz, like, I never do what I've been doing the last 3 days. Let me get to the clock at the end of the segment. Let me just get to the next guest for some relief. That is not how we do the show. The show, we're not even paying attention to the clock. We're just talking through things that are interesting, and then maybe we blow through the clock by 3 minutes. But the last 3 days, all I've been doing is like, where's my ending on this? And then it starts to feel like work. And bleep that, Stugotz. I'm too old and been doing this too long to be having this feel like work. Like, this is, I just want to fool around and laugh a little bit.
Dan thinks the shows this week have been common.
Common.
Throw the mic at the speaker, Mike. Throw this mic at the speakers. Laugh, everybody. Laugh.
Dan, they're all laughing. I promise you it sounds good. It just doesn't sound good right now. Laughter. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. SportsCenter brought to you by Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline. Guest on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Here's your SportsCenter update. NFL news from yesterday. The Jaguars traded Nick Foles to the Bears for a 4th-round pick. The Panthers have cut Eric Reed. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver told Rachel Nichols that the NBA is thinking of conducting a charity game to give fans who are stuck at home something to watch. He also said that he's not sure what the NBA schedule will look like, but he is not ready to think that the league would cancel the season. And finally, Tyra Banks is postponing the opening of Model Land due to the coronavirus. The theme park will emulate a fantasy version of the modeling world with state-of-the-art interactive entertainment where beauty, fashion, tech, theater, retail, and an eating extravaganza collide. The top-tier experience will let you experience your fantasy photo shoot in first class. You get veiled VIP seating, personal consultation with a Model Land fashion and beauty expert, handcrafted Model Land elixir, and assorted truffles, additional wardrobe changes, additional photographs from the shoot, a modeling goodies gift bag, a custom curated row for Instagram, and more. The ultimate experience with Banks, called the Fantasine Dream, will set you back $1,495.
The what dream?
Fantasine Dream. Did I say it right?
I don't have any idea what the word is you're saying.
Fanta, like the soda, scene, dream. That's it. Fantasine Dream.
Okay, thanks for elaborating.
Just under $1,500. SportsCenter is brought to you by Bolt 24. It's advanced hydration for athletes off the field with antioxidant vitamins A and C, electrolytes from watermelon and sea salt, and no artificial flavors or sweeteners. Bolt 24, all-day hydration for all-day athletes. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
Guillermo, put it on the poll. Does the Tyra Banks model theme park sound like a good idea to you at Le Batard Show? One of the things that we miss around here more than sports in being able to do our show is the library of stuff that we go to that allows us to provide the accents for the show. Stugotz had a good stat of the day, but we have neither the long version of the stat of the day intro that my father does or the short version. So, Mike, if you could just recreate for us the short version so Stugotz can give you the stat of the day.
Stat of the day, stat of the day. day. Here is the stat of the day. Stat of the day. Stat of the day. Here is the stat of the day. Stat of the day. Stat of the day. Here is the stat of the day. Stat of the day. Stat of the day. Here is the stat of the
Short one. Yeah, still the short one. Excellent. Lung capacity. You are strong, my friend. That's a good coronavirus test right there. Can you do that? Yes or no?
I feel like I don't have it, like for sure.
Yeah, you're good. Stugotz, what is the stat of the day?
From Elias, assuming Jameis Winston will be in a different team this upcoming season, he will be the only quarterback over the last 40 seasons to have his first and last pass attempt with a franchise be a pick six.
That is so good right there. I was remiss yesterday because there was part of my analysis on the Tom Brady stuff. There was something that I overlooked while saying that he was pretty bad last year. And you should know, Stugotz, Jameis Winston's QBR last season was 53.7. You want to guess what Tom Brady's QBR was last season?
94.2.
53.7. He was exactly the same as Jameis Winston. You have Tom Brady having a rather remarkable season. I understand that you don't look into the numbers and you don't crunch QBR numbers and you don't even know what QBR is. Do you even know what the acronym stands for?
No.
Okay.
I don't even know what an acronym is.
All right. It's quarterback rating, but Jameis Winston and Tom Brady had the same one, 53.7. But the thing that I was remiss in not talking about yesterday in our analysis of this, because Tom Brady was bad last season. And while people are talking about Tampa Bay's weapons, the thing I do wonder about, Jameis Winston was so reckless and turnover prone at a time that you cannot be in that league reckless and turnover prone. He had 30 interceptions, and then he had another 9 passes that he threw that could have also been intercepted. So it's not just that he had 30 interceptions, most in the league by a lot, right? Because Baker Mayfield and Phillip Rivers were terrible last year, and they only had 21 interceptions. He also had more passes that should have been interceptions that were dropped than any other quarterback. Kyle Allen was second, and you saw how terrible he was by the end of the season last year. So, given that, if you put Brady in the backfield, even bad Brady, as he was the last 10 weeks of the season, and all you're changing about the Tampa Bay Bucs, let's say you're not changing anything else because their QBR was the same last season, but what you're changing is that last pass against Atlanta in a close game isn't a pick six. That what you're changing is that Tom Brady, no matter how bad he is, he's not throwing a lot of interceptions. These are his numbers the last decade throwing interceptions. 12, 8, 11, 9, 7, 2, 8, 11, 8. There were, guess how many quarterbacks last year, Stugotz, because the game has changed so much, right? Ben Roethlisberger, you can't win that way anymore. Old, reckless quarterback, that is not the way to win. If you turn the ball over too much, it's going to cost you at some point when you need one of those games. Want to guess how many quarterbacks last year had interceptions in the single digits? Didn't even go double digits on interceptions.
I'm going to say 2.
You've gotten much better, Stugotz, at this game of helping me out where you guess the number. It took you many years to learn how to do this. 21 quarterbacks.
What? Oh, my God.
21 quarterbacks had single digits interceptions. And it does make me wonder, and I don't know the answer to this question, but it does make me wonder if that's more important to Bruce Arians than how many weapons he has on offense. That if Tom Brady is depleted and all he's changing about his quarterback position is I'm putting someone in charge who's not going to turn the ball over. I blew past your point yesterday when you said, well, Peyton Manning did win the Super Bowl when he had 9 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. It was the worst season by far of his career. and he won the Super Bowl anyways. It makes me wonder, how much do you think an advantage it is if I just shave 20 interceptions off of the Bucs season? How much does it change 7-9?
I think it's a huge advantage. Of course it is. I mean, you also have to account for the 33 touchdowns that he had, right? So are they going to make all of those up with Tom Brady? And I think that they will. I think they'll get the same amount of touchdowns and they'll get fewer interceptions, and therefore I think they'll be a better team. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Yeah.
I want to know why it is you're feuding with Bill Simmons, because what were you mumbling about? What happened there?
Listen, this is your relationship, okay? You and Bill are very close friends, and I become friends. As an extension, I become friendly with Bill Simmons, but I'm not nearly the type of friend with Bill that you are. And you think Brady news, Boston news, there are two guys you want on. You want Bob Ryan, you want Bill Simmons. Bob Ryan was there for us the second we asked him. Bill Simmons still has not responded to me or Guillermo after making several requests. And why? Because he wants all the important Brady takes, or at least in his mind, he thinks his Brady takes are so important that he wants them on his podcast, and he doesn't want them on the Dan Le Batard show with Stugotz, two people that he's very friendly with, a company he used to work for. He doesn't want him here. He wants them on his own network, and I am outraged by this.
What is wrong? That's exactly how you would do it. Like, that's exactly the same thing. It's a good
point. Yeah. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Quoting home insurance just got easier with Progressive's Home Quote Explorer. Quote and buy all online at Progressive.com. Do it today. Sarah Spain, the commish, going to join us in just a second here on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Here is your SportsCenter update. NBPA Executive Director Michelle Roberts said she's disappointed with the criticism NBA teams and players have gotten for receiving access to COVID-19 tests. She says that the federal government should be responsible for the scarcity of public tests. Josh Gordon intends to play in the 2020 season as he works his way back from his indefinite suspension. He's always working his way back from an indefinite suspension, Josh Gordon. And finally, when Disneyland closed last week, Friday, amid the coronavirus pandemic, it caused Jeff Rietz's streak of consecutive days visiting the theme park to stop at 2,995 days, a streak that's lasted more than 8 years. SportsCenter is brought to you by Advance Auto Parts. Think ahead, think advance. At any time, 1 in 4 batteries is about to fail. Get a free battery test and free installation with any automotive battery purchase only at Advance Auto Parts. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
Why, Billy? Explain to me why, please. I got skeptical Billy face in my face there moments ago. What were you objecting to?
How do you go to Disneyland 2,000 and whatever straight days? That's crazy. What do you do every day? You just show up to get lunch there? Like, why? What? I don't even shower every day for 2,000 straight days. I can't do the same thing every day for that amount of time.
Well, you could be afraid. I think you've got a consecutive streak of being afraid that lasts much longer than 2,000 days.
I've had random days of courage, Dan. I'll let you know.
I just sent you a text the other day, and you're funny about not returning any texts, but I just sent you a text the other day that I would like to start doing Guillermo's Fear of the Week. I'd like to figure out to create the imaging for just whatever your fear is that particular week. What do you have, Stugotz?
So much to choose from. I mean, how does he narrow it down to one?
Major fear right now is that Dan and Mike don't seem to be taking this social distancing very seriously. They're going to be giving everyone corona.
We've got a job to do. What I love is that ESPN has all sorts of worries about me going to the studio where we could do our show more normally, but here I'm about to get Mike pregnant. He's touching so many of the buttons around here and is so close to me, and he just got done saying during the break, I wish I just had this already so it could go through my system and I could get on with my life.
I am totally with Mike on that, but maybe if you learned how to use the equipment by yourself, Mike could be in the safety of his own home. I mean, how about that? Think of others. I mean, let's go.
Yes. Thank you, Stugotz. I appreciate all your good work. Please, why don't you just leave this segment and go complain to your wife about me carrying your ass for 15 years?
Listen, that is totally fair. Listen, I praise you all the time. I do. I tell my wife I love you.
Oh, stop.
She was left to her own devices. There's a bathroom right here. You want that to be my penalty box? I'll go there. 2 minutes. I gotta go.
Chicken time.
I said I love Dan. You guys don't believe it? There you go.
Sarah Spain is with us. You can check out the interviews that she's doing is what I meant to say. You can check out the interviews she's doing and the good work she's doing. The That's What She Said podcast is where you go. And we're going to have Mike Ryan read to her some of these submissions in a second for hashtag Dan Action is what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to go because I look so much like a Bollywood action star that we discovered yesterday. Many of you are mocking me via the internet, so it's hashtag Dan Action. But before we do that, Sarah has been protecting her beloved Bears for a while now and has had to make emotional arguments on behalf of Mitch Trubisky. The Bears clearly trying to distance themselves from that. I imagine you were pretty excited about Teddy Bridgewater, less so about Nick Foles, or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think Teddy Bridgewater coming off of what he did with the Saints would have been pretty exciting, and I've always been a fan of Teddy Bridgewater. But I've been on the Foles train since before all the good stuff. I've argued that he is a guy who, if in the right system with the right coaches and set up for success, has incredible highs. Now, I understand that he's got some lows as well, and I'm trying not to be swayed by last year's, the injury and the resulting effort with the Jags was pretty bad. But I've been on the Foles train for a while, so I at least think you bring him in at the very worst. You make Mitch play so well that he beats him out, but I don't think that's going to happen. And instead, you have a better option while you've got your defense and a strong team around him. The offensive line is an issue that needs to be figured out because Foles is not nearly as mobile as Trubisky when Trubisky's healthy. But I'm excited about it. Also, at this point, my team has made me so pathetic and sad that I'm kind of like Stugotz, where you just get excited about trying and taking a swing because you're going to either suck and take a swing or suck and accept mediocrity. And we've kind of just been doing that. So why not? Why not give it a shot? Why not be hopeful about it?
Yeah, it's one of the great things in free agency and sports and football that the mediocrity that you haven't seen can provide a hope that is larger than the mediocrity that you have seen. So how is it that you feel about Trubisky, though? You want to be done with him, right? If Foles can't beat him out, that's not going to make you any kind of happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unless for whatever reason Trubisky excels and figures out, I think part of the problem last year was that coming right out of the gate, Matt Nagy threw a bunch at him, presuming that he had taken steps forward, and instead it became clear that he couldn't read defenses, that he needed to have everything dumbed down for him. Now, is that who he is forever? Probably. But, we've also seen some quarterbacks that really needed to take time within their system and within the professional ranks to figure things out. Maybe he comes out and is significantly better, but I still think Foles is a better option based on what we saw from Foles at his highest highs with the Eagles and when he was, with a lot of these people. He has a connection to essentially everybody on this Bears offensive staff, and that's where he thrives the most. And so, listen, I don't really care which one it is. If one of them is just doing awesome to the point where they clearly beat out the other one, great. That's what I want. I don't have any issues with Trubisky. I've, like you said, probably emotionally defended him in ways that were, statistically unproven. But I'm fine if he wins out.
Well, I'm curious, though, have you looked at any metrics or anything that offers you encouragement? Because I don't believe in Foles. I understand that there is a Foles train in Philadelphia because he won the Super Bowl, and obviously he was great for them. But I also thought that was a totally overwhelming Philadelphia Eagles team. And what Foles has looked like everywhere else he's been is what I usually expect Foles to look like. And I haven't looked the numbers. I haven't crunched anything here. But I don't view Foles as appreciably better than Mitch Trubisky. I just think that he played for a team that offensive line was overwhelming. They would have scored on anybody that year. They dusted the Patriots in the Super Bowl because they were sitting there fooling around throwing passes to Foles. That Eagles team, I feel like there are 30 quarterbacks in the league that could have won the Super Bowl with that Eagles team, and the reason I feel that is because I saw one of them do it.
Yeah, I think also he had a great season in 2013 with the Eagles, which was not that dominant, crazy team. He had 27 touchdowns and 2 picks. He, led the team to the playoffs. And again, you can look at what was around him and why did he have such success then that wasn't able to be carried over when he went to St. Louis. He struggled there, 7 touchdowns, 10 picks. Is it the system? Is it the weapons around him? Is it a strong offensive line? I mean, at one point he was considering retiring. So, we love to have guys in the NFL that didn't want to be there anymore. But I think I have not sat down and looked at what the difference was for him in the early years with the Eagles when he came in for Vic, and then when he took over in 2013. And what through lines you can find between that and the success he had again later with the Eagles. But it is clear that if he's in the wrong position, he's a total dud. And so the question is, when he gets to the Bears, does he have the things around him that he needs to replicate what happened in Philly?
We'll get to movie titles with Dan in just a second, and Sarah will judge them and grade them. But Sarah, I'm wondering, because you're a lot like me, you sitting around doing nothing for 24 hours a day seems like a personal hell. Like, it really does for a lot of people, obviously. What is Sarah doing to fill the time? Because you need to move around. You're much like me. You just need to move and go.
Right. I actually have not had that much time to fill because I have my radio show every night. That's 4.5 hours. And then I've been doing some like around the home tapings for Around the Horn at home. I have some stories I'm working on for ESPNW. So somehow I'm the only person who is still remarkably busy during a time when everybody's talking about how they're filling their time and being bored. I do workouts with my favorite yoga/Pilates teacher virtually via Zoom with classes that she's been holding. So my day is not all that different because I already also did my show from home. So at this point, I guess see the dogs a little more often because I don't leave the house to go work out.
At Le Batard Show is where you check in on the polls, and hashtag Dan Action is where you guys need to go. Again, if you haven't been listening the last couple of days, there's a Bollywood action star who looks remarkably like me. There's a movie poster that is jarring, and we have asked the internet to come up with some names for the movie that I would star in as an action star. Mike Ryan has a list of those names. We're going to go through them rat-a-tat-tat here, Sarah, and at the end we're going to ask you to pick a clubhouse leader so far as we try to get to the end of the week and find the best one. Let's get started here, Mike.
Before we get to the best of the best, we have a couple of new submissions at hashtag Dan Action. So far, here are some good new ones. The Matrix. Soy Story. Parmageddon. The Hunt for Red Lobster. Bad News Bear Claws. Planet of the Crepes. Jurassic Pork. Stocky Balboa. I like this one. The Predator. And here, this one's a little easy. Just Grease. All right, so here's some of the best at hashtag Dan Action.
That crepes one, man.
Staken. The Fugitive.
The Fugitive is so good.
Burritos Way. Flan in 60 Seconds. Mission Empanada. John Thick. Pie Hard. Top Gut. Triple XL. 300 pounds. Robocarb. Snack Panther. Tequila Mockingbird. The Fattiator. The Italian Sub.
The Italian Sub. Like, you are making it rain nicknames here. So if you had to pick from among those, Sarah, it sounded like we were tickling you. If you had to pick from among those, who's your clubhouse leader so far?
By the way, one of those is definitely the name of an actual porn, so I think we should stay away from that one. Okay, so my favorites were Parmageddon, Pie Hard, Robocarb, and Snack Panther. I think if I'm going for one of those, this is too hard. I'm gonna go Pie Hard.
Oh wow, Pie Hard is what she's going. All right, a bit of an upset.
Yeah.
All right, that's
I just want to see the movie poster with you.
Okay,
in the tank top and
very good. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate all your help in that regard. You enjoyed that a little too much. Thank you for being on with us. That's What She Said is the name of her podcast. She's doing good work over there. You should check it out. Thank you, Sarah.
See you guys.
Apocalypse Cow.
I saw your faces there. I thought Sarah chose poorly. You guys all seem to have thought that all of you thought that Sarah chose poorly there. We will get into a deconstruction of that in a sec.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. All guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Here's your SportsCenter update. NBPA Executive Director Michelle Roberts says she's disappointed with the criticism NBA teams and players have gotten for receiving access to COVID-19 tests. She says that the federal government should be responsible for the scarcity of public tests. Josh Gordon intends to play in the 2020 season as he works his way back from an indefinite suspension. And finally, a population of parrots is called a pandemonium. Here's the SelectQuote difference. Most companies give you one option, one policy, one rate, but SelectQuote shops and could get you up to 10 options from highly rated life insurance companies. For a free personalized quote, call 800-780-1010 or go to SelectQuote.com today. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. There are a few things this show loves more than 90s baseball. It gets us all excited. Hall of Famer Tom Glavine is the most recent guest on South Beach Sessions, Dan's own podcast. And here is a snippet of that conversation with Dan and Hall of Famer Tom Glavine.
Tom, let's start here. You came up through hockey, and didn't you choose baseball specifically because you controlled the whole game? You held it in your hand?
That was part of it. I mean, I always loved hockey more so than baseball. I think the reason was because when you play hockey, you step on the ice, you're in the middle of the action. In baseball, that's not always the case. I mean, I loved playing center field. I loved playing first base. But, there's periods of inactivity, so you can get a little bit bored. Being on the mound, that wasn't the case. When you're on the mound, it's similar to playing hockey. You're in the middle of the action every single pitch all the time. Everything kind of revolves around you. You're controlling the tempo of the game, all that stuff. And I don't think that aspect of it interested me. It was every pitch, every play I'm in the middle of, and this is fun. So I liked it from that standpoint, and I think that was part of the reason why I gravitated towards pitching. But when I ultimately got drafted by the Braves as a pitcher, it was a little bit of a mental adjustment to think that, okay, I'm only going to pitch now. I'm not going to be able to hit and play the outfield anymore.
Do you have any other places in your life where you want control? Most human beings crave it, even if it's the illusion of control. Sabathia is pretty eloquent on the idea of nothing starts until I say so. There's a power in that.
I like to think I have that control, but I think my wife would probably have something to say about that. But I will say that my style of pitching was probably very much mirrors my life. I'm very controlled in what I do. I'm very thought and process oriented. I like things organized. I don't necessarily like flying by the seat of my pants all the time. I like it once in a while because it's a change. But I'm more of a structured guy. I like to know what I'm doing, when I'm doing it. But I would be lying to you if I said everything starts and ends with me. My wife has a lot more say in that than I care to admit sometimes.
What's the item on your resume? What's the one that you would point to? That is the one that gives me the best feeling of personal satisfaction.
I think aside, obviously, from the wins, I think the number of starts and the innings pitched. That spoke to my longevity, my ability to take the ball every 5 days. And I think that's something that I took great pride in and I'm extremely proud of, and it's not like, oh, I was lucky I never was injured or I never had anything going on. I had things going on a lot. But, I always felt like if I can take the ball, I'm going to take the ball. And if 80% of me is better than 100% of the guy I'm getting ready to face. So there were a lot of times where looking back, maybe I should have spent some time on the DL or things of that nature. But I just felt like if there was any way I could take the ball every 5 days, I was going to do it. And like I said, I think the amount of starts and the amount of innings pitched, once it was all said and done, I think speaks to that longevity, and that's something I'm proud of.
So you're a lefty. If I say to you, who would you rather face? You got to pick one of these. Barry Bonds as a lefty or Gary Sheffield?
Neither one of those guys, really, if they're on their game. I mean, I was always... Of all the guys that I faced, and, everybody always asks you, who are you most afraid of? I wasn't afraid of anybody. I mean, you respect guys, and obviously guys at certain stages or during the season or whatever, if they're hot or they're cold, whatever, present different challenges. But I think the one guy I always said that scared me in terms of hitting a line drive back at me was Gary Sheffield. There was something different about how the ball came off his bat when he hit it, and it was a different sound to it. And I was always fearful that if he hit one back at me, I wasn't going to have time to get out of the way. So that was always something that was on my mind with him. Now, facing those two guys, who would I rather face? I'd probably rather face Gary simply because as everybody knows, lefty on lefty, my changeup wasn't as big a weapon for me as it was against righties. I mean, my changeup was my money pitch. So I felt like I had more options against righties than I did lefties, just because that changeup was neutralized a little bit more. So I probably would side with Gary, but certainly not as a disrespect to one guy's talent level over the other.
What pitching staff throughout history do you look at and say that staff was better than our staff?
That's a good question. Obviously the one that we get compared to so often was the Orioles staff. And, those guys obviously were great. And I watched a lot of those guys when I was a kid. I'm sure there are others. I mean, there have been discussion in today's game, and, the Mets staff always comes up. You look around at today's game and you take a staff like the Mets, and yeah, I mean, every one of those guys has better stuff than I did. Every one of them has better stuff than Greg did. Arguably, John had the kind of stuff that a lot of those guys have, but then it gets down to the pitching side of it. And, stuff is one thing, but being able to go out there and utilize your stuff and actually, translate that into wins is a different story. And I think that's something that clearly that Mets staff has had trouble doing over the years. I mean, every year you look at the Mets and you look at those guys and you think, okay, there's a team that's going to have to be reckoned with, and then somewhere along the line, guys get hurt, and it kind of falls apart. But it's hard, really, to look at too many staffs that have had the longevity and the success that we had. I mean, certainly you could look at Oakland, too, for a short period of time when they had Zito, Hudson, and Mulder. But I guess where we separate ourselves from a lot of great staffs over the year was our ability to be able to do it for a long period of time together, which for a number of reasons just doesn't happen very often. We were fortunate that it did.
When it comes to Greg Maddux, how would you explain to the layman in terms that we can understand how accurate he was?
It's hard to explain. I mean, if you delve into his numbers and you see his strikeout to walk ratio, you see, a number of years in there where how few guys he walked. You look over the course of the career and how few guys he actually went to 3 balls on. I mean, it's really remarkable when you start to dive into his numbers. But I can just tell you, having been his teammate, I think the most remarkable thing about him during the time that I played with him was his consistency. I speak from my own experience. You go out there and you pitch enough games during the course of the year, you're going to have 5 or 6 stinkers where it just doesn't go your way. You give up some runs, you get taken out of the game early, and it's just not your night. I don't want to say I never saw Greg do that, but it was very seldom, particularly that run where he won his Cy Youngs in consecutive years. If he went out there and went 7 innings and gave up 2 runs, it was a bad game. And it was just remarkable to watch how consistent he was in that regard, night in and night out. And then when you watch him pitch, I mean, it really was a lesson in artistry. I mean, he threw the ball where he wanted to. Each pitch set up the next pitch. His misses were just really good misses where, very seldom did he miss over the plate. His misses were always out of the strike zone, where if he did miss, our hitter couldn't do much with it. So, it's the kind of thing that if you were to turn on the TV and watch him, you would not be enamored by anything that he did, other than at the end of the game, you'd go, oh my God, he just threw a 2-hit shutout. That to me was just fun to watch.
Can you tell one of the mythological stories about him and his genius? You guys, when you were on with us together, Smoltz and Glavine and Maddux, you said that the story's not exactly true, that 2 pitches before a screaming foul ball was hit into your dugout. Greg Maddux said the way that this is setting up here, there's going to be a screaming foul ball into the dugout. What's a story that you could tell to sort of explain that he was a little bit ahead of even the greatest of the great?
I remember we were playing Montreal, and Vlad Guerrero was coming up. And there was a situation where he had an open base, and Bobby went out to talk to Greg about what he wanted to do. And I think Bobby kind of had his mind made up that, he wanted to walk Vlad and move on to the next guy. And Greg had a conversation with him, and he said, Bobby, no, here's what I'm going to do. And he's going to pop up to third base. And I'll be damned if he didn't pop up to third base. So, now some of those stories I don't know how many of them are true because, look, there are a lot of Greg stories out there, and there were a lot of times where we would goad Greg into saying something that was a little bit far-fetched just to see if the media would run with it, and I'll be damned if a lot of times they didn't run with it, and then we would just kind of laugh about it after knowing that he just made something up. But that was the respect he had, rightly so, as a very smart tactician out there on the mound. And in my career, obviously you go through phases, but, the first few years of my career were up and down. I was trying to find myself and do some things, and ultimately found my change up and got comfortable with that and took off in 1991. And really, I didn't think a whole lot about what I was doing those 91, 92, 93 before we got Greg. I just kind of went about my game plan, and I didn't really pay attention to what hitters were doing or how they were reacting to certain pitches. And, it really wasn't until we got Greg and I started sitting down on the bench with him and watching games and talking about pitching and stuff like that where, he was the first guy that I really talked to that talked about a hitter's reaction to your pitch and how that dictates, what you can do on the next pitch or what he's looking for and things of that nature. So that's how he thought. If he threw a pitch and he saw a reaction from a hitter, it went a long way towards dictating what his next pitch was. And, to me, he was the best at doing that and certainly hugely helpful for me in my career and starting to implement that in my game plan.
All of that said, though, he was also profoundly disgusting.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, people ask about, tell me some Maddox stories, and it's like I can't. They're it's the kind of stuff you can't say in public, but he was fun to be around.
Well, he was feces obsessed.
Yeah, no question about it. I'll just leave it at that.
That's it. It's got to stay in the clubhouse. I already know. I've got some of it, but I'm not going to lead you there. You absolutely won't do it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you one. I'll talk out of school one time. I remember spring training. We were about 2 days from coming back to Atlanta, and Greg went to the bathroom and used one of Walt Weiss's T-shirts to clean himself. Saw him do it, put Walt's T-shirt back in his locker. And about 3 days later, we're back in Atlanta. And he comes in, and he's kind of rummaging around his locker. He's got this look on his face. And I'm like, Walt, what's wrong? And I knew what was wrong. He said, something smells in my locker. There's something not right. And I'm like, oh, geez, I don't know what it could be, whatever. So he starts going T-shirt by T-shirt and finds the T-shirt that Greg had used. And, without skipping a beat, it was Maddox. So he was looking for Greg and was ready to kill him. So those are the kinds of things Greg liked to do.
It sounds like you were a bit of an enabler. It sounds like you were right there with your teammate.
It was like you just said. I wasn't going to talk out of school. I was being a good teammate. I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Tom, always appreciate your time and appreciate your general way of being. Thank you for spending some time with us.
My pleasure. Happy to do it.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Dr. Celine Gounder going to join us, expected to join us here in just a minute on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Get an update on the coronavirus. Here's your SportsCenter update. WWE announced that WrestleMania will take place over 2 nights, April 4th and 5th, and will be hosted by Rob Gronkowski. The ATP and WTA have jointly announced that the suspension of play on both tours has been extended to June 7th, a decision that eliminates the entire clay court swing through Europe. And finally, phobophobia is a fear of phobias. Vivid Seats is the top ticket source for the live events you crave. They now have a loyalty program that allows fans to earn credit back. Go to the App Store or Google Play, download the Vivid Seats app, and enter promo code ESPN25 for 10% off your next order. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
So she's known as the disease detective. She's a clinical professor of medicine and infectious diseases at New York University. Let's see if we get informed here a little bit. Dr. Celine Gounder with us on ESPN Radio. Thank you for joining us. She was also voted by People Magazine 25 Women Changing the World. Thank you again, as I said, for joining us. Can you explain to us on the front end what are the biggest misconceptions about the coronavirus?
Well, I think there's some people who are still not taking seriously the severity of this pandemic. We have not seen anything like this since the 1918 Spanish flu. There seems to be the impression that, one, this is no worse than the seasonal flu. That is not true. We're looking at hundreds of thousands of people across the country dying in the coming year. And that's no small thing. We're already seeing health systems, hospitals, and so on overwhelmed by patients already presenting for care. And this is a war, and we're sending our healthcare workers off to the front lines without armor, without the appropriate protections, while, frankly, there are people out in the community still hoarding personal protective equipment that they need. It would be like hoarding bulletproof vests and bullets during a war instead of giving them to your soldiers because you wanted to protect yourself. It makes no sense. And unfortunately, people really need to start pitching in and doing their part. And that means, one, acknowledging this is real, two, really adhering to the social distancing measures, and three, if they have personal protective equipment at home, reaching out to their local public officials to see how they can make a donation of those items safely to the folks on the front lines who need them.
Without being alarmist, can you explain to us the reasons beyond the ones you just gave us that there is a great concern, because you are more informed than the average person by a great deal on this, like the parts of this that are most alarming to you are blank?
I think that young people in particular, but really, of all ages, do not seem to understand why it is so important to do the social distancing. None of us is invulnerable to this, regardless of your age. Yes, we're seeing the most deaths among people 70s plus, but we're also seeing people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who are critically ill, who need to be on a ventilator, and that's no small thing. Being on a ventilator, you can end up with permanent damage to your lungs down the line, with scarring of the lungs. You can have brain damage from decreased oxygen to the brain. And a lot of people who end up on a ventilator have long-term issues with PTSD from the experience. This is not a minor thing. So this is something to be taken very seriously. The other thing is this is causing collapse of our health system. So it's not just about people with coronavirus. It's everything else. So if we are completely overrun with patients with coronavirus, we can't take care of all the patients who have everything from appendicitis to a stroke. And so this is really, we really are at war with this right now.
Doctor, you seem very frustrated, and understandably so, because there's a lot of people, there's supplies that doctors need that are trying to help patients. There are people who are not taking this thing seriously. What has been the biggest challenge for you and other doctors out there? What's frustrated you the most?
Well, I am really scared for my coworkers. I have a coworker this morning who texted me. She is pregnant. She's, I guess, about 6 months pregnant, and she's being asked to come into the hospital to work because they are so short-staffed. And we don't know still exactly what the risks are to pregnant women, to their unborn children. And not to mention the fact that she's also at one of the many hospitals now across the country where we're seeing shortages of personal protective equipment, where we're out of those N95 respirators. Doctors are being told, nurses are being told to use those loose-fitting surgical masks, which is not what you're supposed to use in this situation. We use those masks to put on the patient so that they don't spread to other people. It works differently. And then most recently, I saw the CDC is now recommending, well, if you run out of masks, why don't you, doctors and nurses, wear a bandana or scarf? I mean, that is just, I can't even tell you how scary that is for those of us in the hospital. And it's only potentially adding to the problem, because if one of us is taken out sick, well, you've added to the patient load, but then you've also taken out somebody who would be caring for those patients. So you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot twice by doing that.
Where are we in terms of the way other countries are handling this versus the way that we've been slow to test? Like, when you see the comparisons with other countries, how bad has the United States been comparatively?
We're one of the worst, quite frankly. For a world superpower, this is shameful. We are not living up to what our potential is by any means, whether it's from a can-do, let's do this together, band together and conquer this thing perspective, or from, more of the logistics and putting to work the science perspective. We are really behind countries like China, Singapore, South Korea. And sadly, many people are going to die as a result of that failure.
Where do you see hope?
I do see hope. If I look through my Facebook feed this morning, I was looking through and it was full of pictures. Sorry. It was full of pictures of my friends from med school, from residency, who are all, who are all gowning up and gloving up to the degree that they can, but really underprotected. And I'm just terrified for them. And look, I have worked in other places. I've been on the front lines working as an Ebola aid worker in West Africa. We were never asked as aid workers to go in this unprotected and unprepared. I take hope in the fact that my colleagues are so committed and that we're there for each other.
Doctor, I'm sorry. Let's allow her to regroup. Can we have you back for another segment, please? I'd like to get some more information from you and let you gather yourself. Would you be willing to come back for another segment, please?
Sure.
All right. I don't think the timing is very good on doing a sponsorship here. We will make it up to the sponsor in a moment. We come back with the disease detective, Dr. Celine Gounder, next.
If you missed any of the show, you can listen to all 3 hours of the Dan Le Batard Show, plus our Miami Only Hour and our Best of Podcast on demand in the ESPN app, and subscribe to the Le Batard and Friends Podcast Network featuring South Beach Sessions, Stupidity, and Mystery Crate. Please rate and subscribe. New episodes are posted every week wherever you get your podcast.
Super jarring and scary to have someone on who's a lot more informed than we are, who has a lot more facts than we do, and to ask her about hope and to get that heartbreaking response. So we're grateful to Dr. Celine Gounder for joining us here again on ESPN Radio, clinical professor of medicine and infectious diseases at New York University. Can you explain to us what is out there so far that you are viewing as fiction, as total fiction, that people need to understand the facts around this and they're getting some fiction?
I think, number one, this is real. I think, number two, the coronavirus is not the seasonal flu. This is far more deadly. Seasonal flu kills about maybe 50, 60,000 people across the United States per year. That's no small number. But with this, we're looking at hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans dying in the coming year. And it's not just people who are elderly. Yes, the highest mortality rates, death rates are among people 70s, 80s, and plus, but we are seeing young people in their 20s, 30s, 40s dying from this. We are seeing them end up on ventilators. And not to mention that young people can also be transmitters of infection even if they don't get very sick. So I find that profoundly concerning. We're also now realizing that in the youngest, kids under 5, the mortality rate and severe disease rate is not negligible either. We hadn't fully comprehended that before, but now in looking at the data from China and elsewhere, we're realizing little kids are also at risk. And so especially for those of us, and this is common with infectious diseases and viral infections, that those of us who are young adults are the ones who are the least affected in some ways, but we don't live in a vacuum. We have little brothers and sisters. We have children. We have parents and grandparents. And this affects all of us that way, not to mention the fact that I know many people are concerned about the economy. They're concerned about their jobs, their livelihood. Are they going to be able to make rent? But none of that is going to get fixed so long as we're in this public health crisis. The crisis needs to be addressed first, and people need to be given a bridge to the end of that. So working families do need help, but the economy in bigger picture terms really isn't going to recover until we get over and through this crisis. And so we need to be focused on doing that.
What would you say is your most optimistic projection for when this will end? Because I'm now beginning to read stuff where you're talking about 18 months and it can come back. It's not going to be something that just disappears. Your most optimistic projections here are what?
I think that if we can really commit to real social distancing, and by that I mean, you know what, if you're a family that has, for those of us who are more privileged, a housekeeper, a nanny, unless they're going to stay with you all the time and live with you, you really need to think about your family unit as a bubble. No one goes in or out, period. And we need to start viewing it in those terms, with the exception of really essential runs to the grocery store and, you know, those very essential things. We should be staying at home as a family unit. If we do that, I think we have a decent chance, maybe over 5 months, of curbing this to the degree that we can loosen some of those restrictions, those interventions a bit. That said, we are still looking at a longer period of time. We probably will see waves of this where you'll have to reinstitute measures for a period and then loosen. And then once you see an increase in cases, reinstitute. So you're going to see a sort of wave of that after the initial period of really strict measures. I think looking to China will be very informative because they're in the midst of essentially loosening up after a period of very strict measures, far stricter than we will ever accomplish. So I think it'll be instructive, but at the same time, I would anticipate for us, we're going to have to maintain restrictions for longer because we're not doing so as rigorously.
We're just getting started with this, and it sounds like from what you're saying that our healthcare system is already overwhelmed.
Yep, it's already overwhelmed. You know, I have friends who are surgeons who are not doing surgery anymore. They're pitching in on the medicine wards to help us out. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff like that that's happening. The regular health system is falling apart already.
And you think how much worse is this about to get, even if we apply the measures in the strictest possible way and somehow get better at this than we've been?
I think the next 2 months, you're going to see exactly what we saw coming from hospitals in Wuhan and what we've seen from Italy. I think it's going to be the same thing, maybe even worse.
Dr. Celine Gounder with us here on ESPN Radio. She's a clinical professor of medicine and infectious diseases at New York University. If you're telling people that they need to know these handful of things, I know you must find appalling as you're watching these television video clips of Florida spring breakers saying, hey, I got to keep partying here. But the most important things that people need to know now, the most important facts that people need to know now are what?
I mean, the basic stuff of washing your hands still applies, but I would say stay home. If you're not a healthcare worker or doing some other absolutely essential service like that, stay home. And really, you know, there are other ways to celebrate with your friends, to support one another. I have friends, and unfortunately I haven't had the time to join in because I've been so swamped with everything related to this, but I have friends who are having happy hour, you know, over Zoom a couple times a week. I mean, there's so many. We're fortunate, actually, given the time we live in, to have those kinds of things that we can do. The way that technology can still help us remain connected. You know, that was not the case during the 1918 Spanish flu. So, in some respects, yes, it's social distancing. I would think of it as physical distancing, not necessarily that you have to lose your relationships with other people.
Doc, people are so confused as to what they can and cannot do in terms of going outside. So I know you're saying stay inside, but are there a few circumstances where you're saying, hey, it's okay to go outside, maybe exercise if there's an emergency? I know you're saying do your best to stay inside, but I think a lot of people are confused as to how long they can go outside and how often they can go outside.
Yeah, I wouldn't think of it so much as how often and how long. I would think of it, you're traveling in your bubble. Right? So You have a bubble that is at least 6 feet, 2 meters, 2 yards in diameter. A sphere, think of it as a sphere you're building around yourself. And again, you should not be coming closer to anybody than that. So if you want to go for a run, you want to go biking, as long as you maintain that distance from other people, I think that's okay and that makes sense. However, from the photos I was seeing, images I was seeing from San Francisco, for example, where they have instituted shelter-in-place regulations, that is not what we're seeing, and that's concerning.
Can you help me understand the very basic ways for all the social distancing? For example, if I go to a grocery store and I put my debit card in a place where everyone else has had their fingers, that's a risk, is it not?
It is. I think, there's some things that we just cannot get around. However, if you are fortunate enough to live in a place where you can order your groceries online and do a curbside pickup, have them delivered to you and have somebody leave them at the door for you. Those are we're fortunate that those options even exist today. Those are the kinds of things we can do to keep our distance and still do what's necessary to get by during this period.
Have you ever been this scared?
No.
Okay. Doctor, we appreciate your time. We appreciate the information. Thank you for making the time.
Well, thank you for letting me talk about this on your show. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Doctor.
We'll probably have to check back in with her if she has time in order to keep getting more information on this. Our thanks to Dr. Celine Gounder, again, clinical professor of medicine and infectious diseases at New York University.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Cody Zeller is expected to join us here in just a minute on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We'll check in with him again. Talked to him yesterday. Here's your SportsCenter update. WWE announced that WrestleMania will take place over 2 nights, April 4th and 5th, and will be hosted by Rob Gronkowski. The ATP and WTA have jointly announced that the suspension of play on both tours has been extended to June 7th, a decision that eliminates the entire clay court swing through Europe. And finally, scientists once put mice in a maze and exposed them to loud, heavy metal music. They didn't finish the maze. They killed each other. SportsCenter is brought to you by Advance Auto Parts. Think ahead, think advance. At any time, 1 in 4 batteries is about to fail. Get a free battery test and free installation with any automotive battery purchase only at Advance Auto Parts. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
We segue awkwardly. We no other way to segue from what really was a scary, and if you weren't scared before, I hope you're scared now, and I hope that fear motivates you to behave in a way that is more responsible than many of us have been behaving. To Cody Zeller, who has been bored and quarantined and says he has pledged to learn something every day. I've got some more questions, actually, based on what he told us yesterday about how the Charlotte Bobcats are working out. But before we get to that, he has pledged to learn something.
Charlotte Hornets, big fun.
Okay, sorry,
Wow.
my bad. Charlotte Hornets, I'm sorry. Is anyone else still doing that? I'm the only one. I think I did that yesterday, too, didn't I? Regardless, Cody
Zeller
$10,
though.
With us on ESPN Radio. He has pledged to learn something every day. He has failed to learn the guitar. He has failed at woodworking. What is it that you're working on today?
Well, maybe I need to go back to the update on yesterday because I think we left at 12:30. So I actually didn't have any success yesterday either. My goal was, I'm not much of a reader. I read half a book a year probably, and so I was like, I got all this free time. I'm going to sit down sit down with a nice book. So I sat down. About 2 hours later, I woke up from a nap. So. That didn't work out so well.
You and me both.
Okay, so which of you failed worst at, or where's the most success that you've had?
I had a little bit of success yesterday. So after I woke up from my nap, I organized. I have an extra bedroom in my house, so I have it's kind of turned into a little bit of a shoe room, and so I'm a Jordan athlete, so Jordan takes great care of us, but. They send us so much shoes and gear, shirts, T-shirts, sweatshirts, everything else. So during the season, whenever the boxes show up on my front doorstep, I just throw it in this extra bedroom. So yesterday, I've started to attack the task of sorting through all that stuff. So I had a little bit of success the job's not quite done yet.
All right, so what's on the docket today, Zeller?
Tough telling. I don't know. It's actually nice here in Charlotte, so I'm thinking about going on a run. So that'll kill a little bit of time. I don't know. I was just talking to my brother, and he's in the same boat, and he's like, when we were kids, what we used to do when we were bored, we used to build forts out of our couch cushions. And he's like, you just need to build a fort. And I was like, if I get to the point where I'm building forts in my house alone, we got bigger issues. So anyway, we'll see where today takes me.
Can you explain to the average layman, because people have no idea the kind of shape you guys are actually in. So when 7-footer Cody Zeller goes on a run, what does that look like? Like, how fast are you actually running, and for how long?
I actually like running, especially if it's a nice day. So maybe a few miles. A decent pace.
What's the decent pace? What do you mean by that, though? Like, if I were to put you on a treadmill and you were just to run on a treadmill, what would you be doing? 7.0, 8.0, 9.0? What would you be doing?
We do a lot of short distance, because short distance, for basketball. So, like a 9.5 or so, somewhere around there, all the way up to I think the treadmill goes up to 15. So if we're doing, shorter sprints, we'll go all the way up to 15.
When you say you're a Jordan athlete and Jordan takes care of you, explain to us, what amounts we're talking about for Cody Zeller.
So, for one thing, I was the first white Jordan athlete, which I thought was a big deal. I had a 1 in 30 chance of getting a Jordan deal, and it was that the Charlotte Hornets drafted me. So, MJ's obviously our owner, so that was my 1 in 30 chance of getting a Jordan deal. But they take great care of us. They take us on all of the Jordan athletes on a trip each summer. And we've been to Cabo, we've been in Atlantis. Last year was in Monaco, and it was one of the most ridiculous trips I've ever been on. So, but as far as gear goes, I bet I have, close to 1,000 pairs of shoes, every one of everything they make, they sent to us. So we just got a shipment on the front door yesterday, probably 10 or 15 pairs of boxes full of shoes and gear.
Is Jordan on those trips? And have you guys ever got on a trip where there wasn't a casino?
Yes, he's always on them, and there's always a casino because he's involved in it. So there's casino. There's always someone rolling cigars. There's gambling. So there's always something. There's always golf. So he's in order for him to show up, there has to be those few things.
All right, Cody. We'll check in with you again tomorrow. Thank you for making the time, sir.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah, I want to talk to him every day, find out what he's not learning as he tries to do some learning.